we're now going to be joined by our next presenter. So thank you, Alison. Alison has joined us from the Social Care Institute for Excellence, and she's going to be talking about learning from safeguarding adult reviews. So over to you, Alison.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and hello to everybody. I think, shall I share my own slides, or are you going to share them from your end?
Do you want me to share them, Alison? Happy to, if it's easier.
No, don't worry, I'll do it. I'll do it from my end. It's probably easier for me to.
No worries.
Yeah, let me do that. Okay. Does that come up on the screen?
Not yet. No.
Okay. Let me just. Okay. Hopefully that's come up on the screen now.
Yeah, that's all come up.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks. Great. So I'm just going to start off by just doing some introductions. Firstly, I just wanted to say a little bit about myself before I make a start. So I'm Alison Ridley from the Social Care Institute of Excellence. My background is as a registered social worker, and over the years I've specialised mostly in adult safeguarding work, and then strategic work with the Safeguarding Adults Board in Hampshire. And I've also worked as a lead reviewer in Safeguarding Adults reviews in the last 10 years. And now my role at SCIE is to have oversight of the work that we do in relation to safeguarding audits and reviews. So that mostly involves training and also delivering reviews. So that's just a little bit about me before I start. As you can see, that the kind of topic that we're going to be covering today it's really a chance for me to talk a little bit about what Safeguarding Adults reviews are all about, what their intentions are, what they can bring to us as we do our safeguarding work, and also helping us to think about the kinds of learning that we can get from Safeguarding Adults reviews, both in terms of our own practice and also in terms of how we make improvements to the wider system that we work in. I'm going to also talk a little bit about SARs that have happened in recent years in Surrey and some of the really valuable learning that you've already gained from those. So before I make a start, though, I wanted to do a number of polls with you just to really help me get an understanding of everybody on the call today. So these are the polls. I've got some assistance. Karen has set up the polls for me. So the first one is this. It's really just to give me a chance to get a sense of how many colleagues on the call today have actually had so far any direct experience of taking part in a multi-agency Safeguarding Adults review. And that could be being a practitioner that comes to a workshop. It could be you might have a role in terms of the commissioning of a SAR. You might be one of the subgroup members on your board. You might be somebody that's involved with quality assurance, all kinds of different roles. But I just wanted to get a feel for how many people have had some direct involvement. So if you can do the poll, I'm hoping, I'm not quite sure how it will come up on the screen, but I think Karen will be able to show me the results if I can't see them.
Alison, I've just launched the polls,
Yep.
but they've all been collated together, so all three of them
Oh,
have gone live now.
okay.
So if people could just take the opportunity to spend some time answering all three of the polls, and then what we could do, Alison, is if we could just review each of the answers once people have submitted them. I think that's probably the best way to go around it.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. What I'll do is I will just quickly mention the other two polls that you've got with you now then. Right, let me just go back to the PowerPoint screen. Okay, lovely. Okay, so that's, as you know, that's poll one. The second poll that I've put up that you'll have got now is just to give a bit of a feel for the kind of role you might have taken. So there's quite a number of options you can choose from there. If you just want to select the closest one to what you've done, if you have had some involvement so far in a review. And then the third poll, once you get to that one, is really just to give us a feel for how colleagues on the call have found SARS. So you might not have actually been involved in a SAR yet, but you may still have perhaps read a SAR report or gone to a webinar. So just wanted to get, with the third poll, just wanted to get a sense from you of how useful that experience has been, if you have had a chance to do that. If you haven't had a chance to engage in any learning yet, then you can just click on D there. So those are the three polls for you. Right, so before we go any further, hopefully Karen can give me some of the outcomes as they start to come back.
We've had around 150 responses so far, Alison. So do you want me to keep it live for a while?
Just perhaps if we just wait for a moment just to see if there's any more coming through, and then I'd be really interested before I make a start on the content, just to get a sense from people, you know, where they are with it.
Perfect.
So how are the results looking for poll one?
So for poll one, have you had any direct experience in a multi-agency SAR process? 72%, or 73% now have responded no, and 28% have responded yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's useful. And poll two was the one about the roles that people might have had if they've been involved.
Yeah, so we've got a bit of a mix here. 4% are commissioner of reviews, 32% a member of the subgroup that considers SAR referrals, 38% are members of operational or strategic staff who use the learning from safeguarding adult reviews, 10% are members of the subgroup that undertake quality assurance of SARs, 5% are members of the board business team that manage the process of SARs, and 11% are SAR reviewers.
Okay. Right, that's really interesting mix. Brilliant, thank you very much. And then lastly, poll three, which was really just to kind of get a sense of how useful colleagues on the call have found the SAR review material they've read, if they have.
So 33% have found it very useful. 43% have not engaged in learning using outcomes from SARs. 23% have had some use, and 2% have tried to engage in the learning but not have found it useful.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. That's really, really interesting results there. And that gives me a really good sense of, I think, how to try to what information I need to cover with you today. So hopefully it'll be relevant for everybody on the call. Okay, so Karen, can you just confirm that the slides are still up as they need to be on the screen?
Yes, we've got the reviews and the process and purpose slide showing.
Perfect.
Oh, it's just gone.
Oh, okay.
Oh, and it's back up.
Okay, brilliant. I'm going to move on to the next slide now. Okay, so just before I do that, it's just to say what I wanted to start off with really was just a kind of an introduction for people, particularly people who are not familiar with Safeguarding Adults reviews, just a little bit about the kind of basics as to what they are and why we have them. So, so the Safeguarding Adult Review originates in our Care Act legislation. So if anybody's interested in finding out a little bit more about Safeguarding Adults Reviews, one place to start will be having a look at Section 44 of the Care Act, which outlines that there are two types of SARs that can be commissioned by the Safeguarding Adult Board. One, which is the one that's used mostly, would be mandatory SARs. So these are cases that the law tells us we must undertake a Safeguarding Adult review on. And these cases are when an adult dies or is seriously injured as a result of abuse or neglect, whether that is known or whether it's only suspected. And this is the other part which is key, and there is concern that partner agencies perhaps didn't work together as effectively as they could have done. So cases that meet those criteria that I've just described there, those cases would most likely meet the criteria for a mandatory SAR. And it may be that many colleagues on the call today will be aware of cases of that kind, which they think would fit that criteria. If you are aware of cases where there has been a really adverse outcome that has been related to abuse or neglect, and you felt that perhaps in some way that the partner agencies weren't working together as would have been hoped, then please make sure that you know what you need to do in order to raise a referral for a Safeguarding Adults review. Each area across the country has their own local mechanism, but if you want to find out how to do that, I'm sure that you can get the details you need from the website of the Safeguarding Adults Board for Surrey. And also you'll find as well your safeguarding lead within your own agency will be able to advise you what the local process is for raising a case through to be considered. And the other type of Safeguarding Adults review, this is far less often used, but it is available, is what we call a discretionary SAR. And this is a very broad criteria. As you can see in the Care Act, it literally just tells us that there are any other situations involving an adult in the local area that has needs for care and support. These would be the kind of cases where the local Safeguarding Adults Board thinks that there's some really important learning that they want to draw out that will improve practice and reduce risk to adults. And they perhaps have been made aware of a case that doesn't fit all of the criteria for a mandatory SAR, but nevertheless, they think would have some really valuable learning. So those might be cases that could be taken forward as a discretionary SAR. So that's where we start with the legal background for a SAR. And then just to give you a bit of pointers in terms of what the purpose of a SAR is, what we should be hoping it will achieve. So these things are taken from the Care Act and also from the statutory guidance for the Care Act. So SARs should really support us with learning and improvement work, and particularly with a focus on trying to make our system safer in the future, so that it's less likely that adults will be harmed going forward. So it's all about identifying how where are there potential weaknesses in our system that make safeguarding perhaps not work as well as it should. Particularly focusing on how agencies are working together. And one of the things that I'll be coming back to through the session is thinking about the importance of the kind of learning that we achieve through a review. So we would always hope to analyse what happened in a case as our starting point. But more than that, it's really important that we actually go beyond just the understanding of what happened, but really get to an understanding of why those things happened as they did. But if we can get to that kind of learning, then that will be the kind of learning that really helps us identify the improvements that we need or the changes that we need in order to reduce the likelihood of it happening again. I should also just say as well that if anyone has any questions as we go through, Karen has opened the chat, I think, so you can pop questions in there. What I might do is stop every now and again just to have a quick look or to hear from Karen if there's any questions for me to respond to. And there will also be some time at the end of the session as well if there are any other questions that crop up. So these are some of the messages from the Care Act about the kind of process that we should be thinking about when we have a SAR. And this is something I think that often is a great concern to practitioners, because people understandably are worried that perhaps if they get involved in a SAR, if they're asked to attend a SAR or take part in a SAR in some way, that they're going to end up being blamed or criticised. Now, the Care Act tells us that it's very important that a Safeguarding Adults review is a trusted and a safe experience. And I can't underline that enough, because I think in my experience as a reviewer, I know that if practitioners and frontline managers don't feel that they can feel safe when they're involved in a workshop to do with a SAR, then it's much harder for them to be open about what happened at the time. And it's that openness and honesty that's really critical in helping us understand what happened and why it happened in that way. So that's one of the most important things about a review process. And I hope that colleagues on the call, those of you who have been a part of a process already, I hope that that was your experience, that you did feel it was a safe place for you to talk about practice and to learn. One of the other things the Care Act tells us is very key for us to ensure that we think about how we can involve the adult if they're still alive, and also the family and other trusted friends if that's appropriate. And I think this is a really important point for us, because in most of the SARs that we tend to do, generally speaking, the adult will have died, sadly. So we don't always have the chance to actively involve the adult. But there are occasions when they may still be able to take part. And then, of course, we need to think about advocacy as well, to make sure that we think creatively about how we can support the adult and their family to be involved in a meaningful way in the SAR. And then the last point on this slide is also a really important one, which the Care Act says, and that's really how vital it is for us to involve practitioners, because in order for us to really understand what has happened in a case, although looking at written records is always a good start, written records can only tell you so much, and they won't generally give you all of the kind of detail that's going to help you to really understand the pressures and the demands and the elements of the system that were making practice either more difficult at the time or perhaps supporting good practice. And that's why when you have a safeguarding adults review, it's so important to be able to actually speak directly to people who were involved at the time, because they can tell you from firsthand what the challenges were and why things were better or worse than they'd hoped in terms of doing good safeguarding practice. And again, for those of you who are perhaps particularly interested in safeguarding adults reviews and wanting to do a little bit more reading around the topic, there are the SAR quality markers. I've added the link at the bottom there, which are on the SCIE website. The quality markers are really a chance for people to reflect on things to think about if you are involved in a SAR. So it could be, it may be that you're involved as a commissioner, or you may be involved in the process itself, in managing the process, or you might be a practitioner going to the workshop. The quality markers will have something for everybody, really, in terms of what to aim for and what's good practice, and what will help you to get, hopefully, really useful learning from your SAR. So those are definitely worth a look if you've got a spare moment. I'll just stop there in case there's any questions. Don't know if there's anything come up yet at all, Karen. If there has, just give me a shout.
We just had a comment from our independent chair, Teresa, and she said, really appreciate the emphasis that the SAR should be a trusted and safe experience, and that the process should involve practitioners in that spirit of safety, respect and trust.
Thank you, Teresa. Yes, I totally agree. That's so important. And certainly from my experience as a reviewer, although I think it can feel like a challenging experience for practitioners, generally speaking, I find that people go away feeling like it has been an opportunity for learning, and a positive one. So definitely that's what we should be aiming to do. Great, thank you. So moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the different kinds of learning and improvement work that can come from SARs, because I think it's not always obvious. There's lots of different ways that you can come across SAR outcomes, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But that's why I think it's worth us just dwelling for a few minutes on the different kinds of learning that you can benefit from. So what I've identified is two main types of learning. There are probably others as well, but I think these two are probably the main categories. So for example, if you were to, after today's session, if you were to go away and look up some SARs in order to perhaps do some professional development work, or something for your team maybe. If you were to read a SAR report, the kinds of learning that I think are probably the ones that will stick out for you will first of all be what I've described here as case-specific learning. And that would be learning that is directly relevant to the case that's being reviewed. So if, for example, the case was, I'm going to use the name SAR Mary because that's one I'm going to come on to later in the presentation. And it's one of your ones from Surrey that some colleagues on the call may be very familiar with. So if we're talking about the SAR Mary case, when you read through that case review, you'll find that a lot of the learning that's been identified in that review is what we would call case specific. So it's all about what's been identified in terms of the practice in Mary's case, what was done well and what perhaps wasn't done so well, and the kind of reasons. And then the second kind of learning that you might find in a review would be called systems learning, and that will be a slightly different kind of learning where the reviewer will have tried to also work to understand some of those underlying factors that actually supported good practice or perhaps made good practice more difficult. And these could be all kinds of things that you come across as a practitioner or a frontline manager. It could be to do with the culture that you're working in. It could be to do with things like your IT system. It could be to do with procedures in terms of how you share information with different agencies. All of those different things, those elements are not just down to one practitioner or one human being. They're much more about how your system is functioning and the kind of tools and ways of working that are in practice. Those tools and ways of working, generally speaking, will be helping us to practice well, but sometimes they may, for whatever reason, not be working as intended. And so a SAR could be, hopefully, a way of looking at that more closely and trying to understand in each case some of those things that perhaps have prevented or made good practice more difficult. And then the other thing I wanted to mention as well about SARs and learning is that SARs are challenging, both for frontline staff and practitioners and managers, but also SARs often are very challenging for strategic managers and senior managers, our managers that sit on the Safeguarding Adults Board or work in those sorts of roles, because often a SAR will be identifying perhaps where systems aren't working as well as they should. And then it's obviously important for the board and the senior partners of agencies to respond to that and to think about if there are vulnerabilities within the system, what can we do to address those? So hopefully a SAR will be challenging, but in a good way to everybody that's involved. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about how SARs can make a difference to frontline practice. And I think this is a really important section, actually, because I noticed that from the polls, a lot of colleagues on the call today, in fact, it was 73% when Karen read the results out. 73% hadn't yet had any direct involvement in a SAR, and that's obviously a lot of people on the call. So it's important, I think, for everyone here to feel that they, even if they aren't directly involved in a SAR, they can see why it might still be useful for them to have a look at the reports or have a look at the webinars or the summary of the report, so that even though you might not have known the case or your agency might not have been directly involved, you may find, hopefully, that you feel there's some useful learning that's relevant to all of the agencies locally. So I wanted to start off with this question at the top, really. Do SARs make a difference? Because I think I often hear people kind of questioning, really, whether SARs do make a difference. And sometimes we might feel that the learning from a SAR is very repetitive, and you might find excuse me, that many SARs actually come up with similar messages. And so I think there is a sense in which people think, actually, what difference do the SARs make? Do they actually help us to improve things? And what I would say to that is that I think there are two different ways that SARs can be helpful. And this is just taking you back to the points I was making a few moments ago about the types of learning. So within a SAR, any SAR that you might choose to read the report of, you'll find the case-specific learning. And a look at that for anybody that's working operationally will mean that you can hopefully find something to take away from that case-specific learning. It may be that you weren't directly involved in Mary's case, should we say, but you may have other cases that you are aware of that where the learning actually is relevant. And I think so that in a way, it's about having, as professionals, being willing to take on that responsibility for learning and developing our own practice, and thinking about how you can use a SAR and just, explore whether there is some relevant learning in that SAR for you. And the second area where I think SARs can make a difference would be, as I mentioned before, how the system responds to a SAR. So hopefully a SAR will have identified some of the more significant service improvements, things, as I mentioned earlier, like maybe the IT system, or maybe the culture in an organization, or the procedures that perhaps aren't working so well. So those kind of improvements are the responsibility of our system leaders and managers to respond to. And so hopefully where you've got a SAR that has reached that kind of learning, it'll mean that your SAR should make a difference to your local area and to how your system's functioning. And that will be very much dependent on how it's responded to by the system leaders, the people that sit on your Safeguarding Adults board, and whose role is to identify that kind of learning and make sure that the system's working well. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about also just thinking of frontline staff and some of the ways that you can, in a way, apply thinking about SARs and your own learning and development. And as you can see at the top there, this is aimed really at people maybe who haven't been directly involved in a SAR. So I've just put a few things down, and there's no sort of surprises there really, but just thinking about how continuous professional development is so critical for all of us, whatever kind of role we have. It's so important that we all open to thinking about how our practice can be improved and how we can keep learning and keep improving. And so for all of us, I think SARs hopefully would be an opportunity to think about how we can support that culture of learning locally, either in our own team, perhaps, or in our own organisation. Do we feel that there's enough priority put on that, especially when everyone is so busy and so pressed? Do we feel that our cultures are working to support professional development sufficiently? Another thing that you can think about when you're coming to do your learning work is around where you would look for learning and resources. And I'm sure that most colleagues on the call will probably have probably a relatively good sense of where they would go if they wanted to look for a SAR or wanted to look for some research. But if you feel you don't, then I would really recommend talking to somebody, maybe your line manager or somebody in your agency that who can point you in the right direction, so that you do feel that you've got resources available to you that you can make use of if you need to do that. And I have just mentioned at the bottom of this slide here that in relation to SARS, a good place to have a look as a starting point will often be on the website of your Safeguarding Adults Board, because your board will be publishing SARS and domestic homicide reviews as well, and we'll also be able to provide some details of what kind of improvement work is going to be done. So those sorts of things also, I think, are really valuable for us to see how not just what the SARS said, but also what's going to happen, what difference is it going to make in practice in our local safeguarding system. And I just wanted also to just think about, I guess, more widely as a Safeguarding Adults partnership, as a board of agencies working together, to think about the kind of different audiences of people that will hopefully take something useful from a SAR. So at the top there, in terms of system improvements, it should be your systems leaders and managers that can take forward the improvement work. Practitioners also can use the practice learning, the case-specific learning, to think about their own practice. And then lastly, but really important, service users, families, and our citizens, our local citizens, should hopefully be able to see, if they were interested and they wanted to look on, to see how improvement work is happening in their local area, the SAR and the improvement work that's published should be able to give them a really good feel for some of the key areas of work that are going on. And for those of you who would like to spend a little bit of time just looking at some research around SARS, the national analysis of SARS, which looked at all the SARS that took place and were published between 2017 and 19. That link there will take you to that report, it's a very detailed report, it's a very sort of academic, researchy report, but there are some shorter sort of summaries which you can find on the ADAS site, which I'd be happy to direct people to if you needed me to, that will give you a kind of a shorter, more pithy look at some of the learning that came out of that. And Michael Preston Shute and his colleagues are currently doing a follow-up piece of research looking at SARS that have come out in the last 2 years. So between 2000, I think it's 20 to 22 is the area that he's covering now. So, and that the results of that should be published in the spring, and that will give us a whole new kind of host of information about the kind of learning that's coming through from SARS, and what we can understand about that. And then just coming sort of towards the end of this presentation, I wanted to spend a little bit of time just thinking about your local picture of learning from SARS. Now, I'm thinking that a good few people on the call today will probably have heard of SAR Mary, which was published in 2021. And SAR Mary was a Safeguarding Adults review, but at the same time, it also met the criteria for a domestic homicide review. And so it was published as undertaken and published as a joint review. And as you can see, Mary had a history of drug misuse and mental health issues. And she died by hanging in 2017. And she was, unfortunately, she experienced an increasing amount of violence and coercive control in the final months of her life. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail today about Mary because I think many of you will be aware of the case already, so I don't want to duplicate, but just wanted to spend a little bit of time just highlighting some of the really important and useful messages that came through that SAR, some of which I think have been echoed already today on your agenda. So as you can see, some of the key learning included better support for parents where they were involved in care proceedings, more joined up working across children and adults, particular focus on professional curiosity and understanding the victim's perspective. And that, of course, is very much linked to taking a trauma-based approach to practice. And also the importance of recognising underlying barriers, including organisational cultural barriers. That's the point I'm going to come on to a little bit more in a moment. So if anyone is interested in looking at SAR Mary or the other SAR that's on your website, which is SAR Peter, there's your website link to the Surrey SAB website where they've got some excellent pages providing details of the two cases. And I wanted to, in particular, point you in the direction of the half-day learning event, which was held, I imagine, about a year or so ago now. On the website, you can see there's a YouTube link, and you can actually watch the webinar through. So this is the link to the webinar. But one of the things I was really impressed by and interested by was that in the webinar, there was some really excellent input about trauma-informed practice. But in addition to that, focus on practice issues, there was also a section that was looking at the system issues as well. So you remember I mentioned earlier in the presentation, there's two types of learning. You know, one is the case-specific practice focus, and the other is looking more at how your system's working. One of the things that really struck me about your webinar was that there was a focus on both of those things, and that Clement, who I understand has left you now and moved to a different role, but at the time he was the head of adult safeguarding in the council. And he did what I thought was an excellent piece looking at some of the real organisational challenges in relation to practitioners recognising when domestic abuse concerns are should be regarded as a safeguarding case, should be recognised as meeting the criteria for a Section 42 safeguarding referral. And it was an excellent piece if you did want to have a look at it on the webinar. It's about 1 hour, 10 minutes into the webinar. And it's just really interesting because Clement does actually talk about culture and organisational culture. And I think those are that's a way of looking at your system, which is quite an unusual one. You don't often hear that being explored, and it's a really important one because I think, as you know, your organisational culture can have such a massive influence on how we perform and how we practice. So I think that's a really good example of how in Surrey you have looked at some really important learning, and you've gone really beyond just looking at the surface stuff, but really trying to understand those underlying factors. So what I wanted to do now is just spend about 10 minutes in breakout rooms So I'm hoping that this is still going to be possible, Karen. If you can let me know if it's still viable for us to do the breakout rooms.
Yes, we should be okay, Alison.
Yeah, okay. Well, so the plan is, let me just take us forward to the next slide before Karen puts everybody into a breakout room. So I've said on here 15 minutes, but I think probably 10 minutes is more than enough. So when you move into your breakout group, there's 2 questions I'd like you to have a think about, just reflecting on the content that we've covered this afternoon. The first one is again, it's focusing really on your own practice and thinking about how you're working and your own development. And really just giving you a chance to talk with your colleagues about what would help you to move that forward in terms of practice improvement. What would be useful? Are the things that you know work well? So, for example, from the SARS in Surrey, are the things that have worked really well for you in terms of improving your practice? Or are there things that you think actually you'd like to let the board know about, some of your ideas, or maybe some of your own managers to be aware of that you need in order to promote your own practice improvement as a professional? And the second question is just to step back a little bit and think about your system. So think about the system learning from a SAR. And have a think about, are there ways, so for example, giving the thought of the SAR Mary, where Clement identified the organisational culture as one of the factors that he thought needed to be addressed. So have a think about your own team and your own organisation, and whether there's any changes or suggestions you think would help you as a team, perhaps, or an agency, really making improvements to your system following a SAR. So I hope those 2 questions will give you enough to kind of get your teeth into. So if we have 10 minutes, and then we'll come back together and just have any final questions in the chat, or any comments in the chat that people want to make from the discussion. Thank you, Karen. I just, before I end, so I'm conscious of time, just to see if there are any comments or ideas or questions in the chat. It'll be just interesting to hear maybe just 1 or 2 snippets from any of the groups, but just very briefly, because we don't have a huge amount of time. There's a question from Jane.
Jane, do you want to pop your question in the chat bar? I think we've got a couple more as well, Alison.
Okay.
Stacey has asked, if something happens with a care company that triggers a SAR, are the care company informed or invited and then advised of the outcomes?
Yes, definitely. It would be absolutely vital that the company, the agency, the practitioners and managers who were involved with the case were invited to take part. Both I'm sure they would be asked to send their records about the case, and also hopefully invited to the workshop so they can actually talk about what happened. And they would get to see the result as well.
Thanks, Alison. And we've got a question here from Paul Colling, who's asked, where an incident triggers both a SAR and a coroner's inquest, will the coroner always wait for the SAR outcome first, or is this down to the coroner's discretion?
It's a bit of a moving feast, that one. So I think quite often you find that the coroner's inquest will already have happened by the time you get to the SAR, but it does vary. And so sometimes you find that the SAR is delayed slightly because the inquest is still going on. It does vary from case to case.
Thanks, Alison. And we've just got a comment from, let's see, Charita, who's asked how we can access the lessons learned from SARS in Surrey. So what I'll do, Charita, is I'll just put in the link to our Safeguarding Adult Reviews page, and you can find all of the information there and all of the latest SARs that are published. Sarah's just beat me to it, so you should see that in the Q&A bar now, Trito. And we've got a few comments here. Teresa, our independent chair, very keen to deploy more thematic reviews and learning, so we don't continually commission reviews to tell us all the same things, not just Surrey's alone. Teresa Carter has said that a common theme in our group related to knowing about SARs and learning outcomes being communicated. Is there a central point to find this detail, please?
There is a national SAR library now, which has been set up since I think it's 2019. So there should be, every SAR should be on that library. And I'm sure, again, Sarah or Karen will be able to provide the details of how to access the SAR library, or you can just Google it and you'll probably find it that way. But that's a really good way of also drawing on the whole national picture of learning.
Thanks, Alison. Audrey has said adult safeguarding reviews learning needs to be thematic as well as individual records to get learning out to frontline practitioners quicker, to prevent similar case themes returning. Just a comment there. Jane's feedback from her group was relating to the delay in getting outcomes from the SAR process and how continual professional development and organisational learning should be more dynamic and be addressed during the inquiry process.
Thank you. Yes, and that's a really good point. It's important, not especially if learning's already starting to emerge, not to wait until the end of the process, but start to think about how you can apply it as soon as possible.
Kate Scribbins has asked, where does overall responsibility lie to ensure that learnings from Surrey SARs are acted on? Does this get reported up to the highest levels of the NHS and Surrey County Council? And how does this happen?
So that responsibility for taking action to improve things following a SAR and also publishing the improvements, that is down to the board, the Safeguarding Adults Board. I'm sure that Karen and Teresa and Sarah will be able to talk to you a bit more about that, but within the annual report of the board, you should be able to find the details that you need. And I know on their website, there's already a lot on there about the learning that's come through. And the annual report shows some of the improvement work that's happening.
Thanks, Alison. And Sarah's just popped in the National SAR Library link for you all to have a look at in your own time. So thanks, Sarah. If there's any other questions, pop them in the QA bar. If not, we will have to move on. So thank you, Alison, very much for your time today. Really informative session and insightful to understand how learning can be shared wider than just our organisation and widely across Surrey. So really appreciate that.
Great, thank you.